People have read it who have encountered ghosts or other supernatural beings. What was your experience like? What happened?
They call it a bobtail when you're driving the tractor of a truck without a trailer. It always feels wrong, like you're exposed, incomplete. That night I was driving bobtail, parked on the shoulder of a desolate road just outside the city, waiting for my convoy partner Steve. He was still 20 miles back in his semi, stuck fixing a flat tire at the last gas station. I stayed behind, figuring he might need the spare I had. The forest surrounded me, dense and silent, pressing in like it was alive. The semi sat idle, its engine off, the parking lamps barely cutting into the black. Fog rolled out from between the trees, curling around the edges of the road. I leaned back in the driver's seat, the stillness thick and unnerving. I was just starting to nod off when something moved at the edge of the light. At first, I thought it was the fog shifting, but then I saw him, a man walking along the tree line. His silhouette was thin, almost skeletal, and he was wearing an old wool coat that hung loose over his bony frame. His steps were slow, deliberate, his boots crunching on the gravel shoulder as he approached my semi. I tensed, my hand instinctively going to the door lock, though I'd already checked it twice. As he came closer, I could see his face in the dim light. It was pale, almost grey, his features sharp and sunken, his eyes hollowed out pits of shadow. He didn't belong here. He didn't belong anywhere. He stopped at the driver's side door and knocked. The sound was sharp, deliberate, and sent a jolt through me. My grip tightened on the wheel as I leaned back, feigning sleep, hoping he'd go away. "Driver," he rasped, his voice rough and guttural, like the words were dragging themselves out of his throat. "I need a ride." I froze, my breath catching in my throat. His tone was flat, devoid of anything human. He knocked again, harder this time, his persistence like a challenge. My heart pounded, and I prayed he'd take the hint and leave. The sound of boots scraping against metal broke the silence. My stomach turned as I realized he was climbing the side of the semi, pulling himself toward the roof. Panic shot through me. My hand darted to the keys, twisting them hard. The engine roared to life, and I slammed on the horn, the blaring noise tearing through the night. But the weight on the roof didn't move. I could hear him walking up there, slow, deliberate thuds echoing in the cabin. My fingers trembled as I grabbed the revolver from under the seat and threw open the door. The cold air hit me like a slap, but I didn't care. I stepped out, gun raised, expecting to face him. The roof was empty. I scanned the area around the semi, my eyes darting to the shadows at the edge of the forest. That's when I saw him again, standing just where the trees began. My blood turned to ice, his hollow eyes locked onto me, and he tilted his head slowly, almost curiously. Then they came. From behind him, others emerged from the woods. A dozen figures, maybe more, all dressed in the same old-fashioned clothes. Their faces were pale and lifeless, their eyes glowing faintly like embers. They moved in unison, stepping into the faint light before stopping, as if waiting for something. I couldn't breathe. The weight of their presence crushed the air from my lungs. Then, without warning, they surged toward me, not walking, floating. Their movements were rapid and unnatural, as if they were being pulled toward me by some invisible force. I stumbled back, nearly tripping over myself, the revolver trembling in my hands. Every instinct screamed at me to run. The sound of their approach, an unnatural low hum, filled my ears. I turned and bolted for the cabin, adrenaline propelling me forward. My boots hit the metal step just as I felt the cold rush of air at my back, as though they were right behind me. I threw myself into the seat, slamming the door shut and locking it, the engine still running. I floored the gas pedal, the tires screeching as the semi roared down the road. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely keep the wheel steady. Glancing in the mirrors, I saw them standing in the middle of the road, their figures fading into the fog. But I knew they'd been closer. I could still feel the cold where they'd almost touched me. By the time I reached the truck stop, my nerves were frayed. I parked and stumbled out of the semi, the harsh fluorescent lights feeling like salvation. An hour later, Steve pulled in, his semi rumbling to a stop beside mine. He climbed out, looking exhausted but calm. "Hey," he said, his voice casual. "You good? You look like you've seen a ghost." I hesitated, my mouth dry. "Did you see anyone on the road?" Near the forest? He frowned, confused. Anyone? Who the hell would be out there? It's the middle of nowhere. I didn't answer. I couldn't. I just nodded, muttering something about being tired, and walked into the diner. What could I even say? Who would believe me? All I know is that whatever I saw that night wasn't human, and I'll never stop near that forest again. Not ever.
If this chilling tale gave you goosebumps, don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications for more stories like this. Thank you for tuning in to Ghostly Echoes. Until next time,